there, friends. Welcome to the Eat, Pray, Run podcast. I'm your host, Dorina Gilmore-Young. And if you've listened to this podcast in the past, I am thrilled to have you back at my table. If you're new around here, welcome. In every episode, you can expect a thoughtful story, an engaging interview, and a little prayer. Today, we are going to hear from cookbook author Tanorria Askew and talk about all things Thanksgiving. And when I say Thanksgiving, I'm talking about food. If you haven't eaten today, you might not want to listen to this one. We are definitely going to make you hungry. As we continue with season 4, episode 11, join us for an adventure chasing God's glory as we eat, pray, and run. My husband, Sean, and I have been hosting these conversations with athletes, artists, chefs, coaches, and authors about the intersection of food, culture, travel, running, and faith. Welcome to season 4, episode 11. We are here for it, and we hope you are too. Each week, I like to start off with a little reflection or devotional that is related to our theme for the day. And today we are talking about food because Thanksgiving is next Thursday, right around the corner. And if you're listening to this later, you know the context. We are in November of 2022. I wanted to start today by reading a piece that was published recently on the Fallow House blog. And this one is food inspired. It's called Let There Be Remembrance. I peel the deep purple skin from the eggplant and then slice it lengthwise as thin as I can get it. I shake sea salt over the slices like stardust over the night sky. I let the eggplant rest while I prep the breadcrumb mixture and beat the eggs. The salt pulls the bitterness from the eggplant. This is an extra step my grandma Sarah taught me. Eggplant parmesan was one of her specialties. Her family hailed from southern Italy. Grandma's gone on to heaven now, but her spirit is very much alive in me, especially when I am in the kitchen. I can see her standing at the stove mixing ruby red marinara sauce with her wooden spoon. Even from her front porch, you could smell that rich aroma of garlic, basil, oregano, and tomatoes swirling together. I give the eggplant slices a quick rinse and then pat them dry with a towel. My grill pan begins to hiss as I pour the olive oil over it. Gently, I dip each slice of eggplant in the egg wash and then press each side into the breadcrumb and herb mixture. The eggplant dances on the grill. When they are golden brown, I remove and add them to the glass dish with marinara sauce already spooned in the bottom. Today, I'm preparing for a special party we host every year at our home. We gather with friends and family around our table for good food and remembrance. September 9 is the day my beloved husband soared to heaven 8 years ago. We call this his heaven-iversary party, a time for reconnecting with old friends, sharing stories, and continuing his legacy. This year, I need the cooking therapy as much as I need the gathering. This time of year always feels particularly heavy. The memories of his final week of life creep in. I remember the hard decision I made to invite hospice into our home. I remember praying for God to take my beloved so he would no longer suffer as the cancer coursed through his body. I can feel the ache deep in my bones like it was yesterday. And while I no longer sit in intense grief in my day-to-day life, she slips in each September like a stray cat hankering for food. It's hard to shake the triggers and trauma that are still with me. As I layer the breaded eggplant with marinara sauce and sprinkle the mozzarella cheese, something small shifts in me. Creating in the kitchen brings light and purpose to my soul. The cadence of chopping vegetables and the mixing together of spices makes me feel present and alive, moving forward instead of stuck on my grief. I remember how my husband Eric Lee loved my cooking. He told me when we started dating that he always dreamed of marrying a gourmet cook. I smiled and told him to leave the cooking up to me. He was on the dishes. In that way and others, we were always a team. Eggplant parmesan was one of his favorite dishes too. My oldest daughter, who has recently become a vegetarian, wanders into the kitchen, her dark eyes shining. Eggplant parmesan, she murmurs. This is one of her favorite dishes, too. She's her daddy's girl, and I'm my grandma's girl. We are layers of generations and tastes and passions and preferences coming together. Creativity is one of the ways my daughters and I have learned to navigate our grief. My two younger daughters started writing a song several weeks ago to share at the Heaven-iversary party. Music has been an outlet for them since they were young. My youngest was 2 years old when her daddy soared to heaven. I know she didn't understand everything that was going on, but she would sing her way through her grief. She would make up long narrative songs about her daddy in heaven and how his tumor was gone. Nights were traumatic for her, but music always helped steady her heart to slip into sleep. It still does. My middle daughter, who was 5 when her dad died and is now 13, loves writing lyrics. This is one of the ways she memorializes him. She's on the worship team at her school and she scribbles out phrases and pounds out chords, teaching her sister the song. Truth be told, these two don't always get along, but there's a sweetness that emerges when they are creating together. The doorbell rings and waves of our people arrive. Friends from my husband's high school and college days are in the mix, along with the students who are mentored and coached by my husband. Friends who prayed with us through the gravity of a cancer diagnosis and then stood by the graveside are there. My husband, Sean, who is one of Eric Lee's best friends, prays over the group. We've been married 6 years now. His words are a balm, a sign of sweet redemption, linking our past to this new present. I'm always filled with a deep gratitude when I gather my people close for this event. God used and uses these friends to buoy up our spirits through the darkest days. We tell stories about Eric Lee around the living room. My daughters sing. We watch a slideshow. We laugh, and tears leak out too. This is how we remember my love 8 years later. This is how we keep him alive in our hearts. If you'd like to read the full version of this essay, you can check it out over on thefallowhouse.com, which is a blog that was started by my friend Rachel Marie Kang. And she actually has a new book that just came out called Let There Be Art. And I highly recommend it if you are looking for more words and inspiration about creativity. I am so excited about our episode today. I have a special guest here in the studio, or shall I say the Zoom studio with me. Her name is Tanorria Askew, and she is a chef, she is a podcast host, and a cookbook author. Her credentials are simple, she says. She comes from the Culinary Institute of her parents and grandparents. I love that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in today's episode. She was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and raised in Indianapolis. Tanorria traveled often to be with her loved ones. And growing up, there was always entertaining and cooking and sharing and telling stories along the way, which is very much the way I was raised as well. So I'm excited for us to dig into her story a little bit more. She got to witness firsthand how food can build tradition and show love, compassion, unity, and fun. And because this is Thanksgiving week, I thought it was especially appropriate to have Tanorria. Welcome. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself? Anything that's not in that bio.
Yeah, so I am so excited to be a part of the Thanksgiving week. I say Thanksgiving is my Super Bowl. I am like in it to win it, ready to cook all the things. I'm shedding encouragement to other people, like, you've got this, you can do this. So Thanksgiving it's not even about Thanksgiving. It's just the cooking and the food and the tradition that is my absolute favorite holiday. So this is real special. I am a cookbook author of Staples Plus 5, 100 simple recipes to make the most of your pantry. And I just approached its 1 year anniversary, which is wild. I cannot even believe that I have a book. And that is a dream and kind of a check on my list of goals for myself. I was on the television show MasterChef, hosted by Gordon Ramsay in 2016. I was on season 7. And even before that, I always dreamed of a cookbook. But that time on the show really validated that that is something that I can do. Like, I deserve a spot in the food industry. I deserve to spread my knowledge and my flavors with other people. And a cookbook was one of those ways that I wanted to do it. And I'm here to say that it has been done.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about your cookbook in a minute, but I want to go back a little bit in the history because I was
Mhm.
noticing in some of the things I was reading that you spent 15 years at the Teachers Credit Union before
Mhm.
leaving to follow these culinary dreams. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that story. How did that transition happen?
Sure. Yeah, so I was one of those interesting college students that really liked to work and go to school. I just like nice things. I just like buying nice things. And so I started at the credit union when I was a sophomore in college, and it was just supposed to be like my summer part-time job that I was going to quit when school started, and I never left, at least not until 15 years later. And it was at a time in my life where I had this expectation from externally from friends and family as well as internally with myself that I was supposed to go and build a career and go to college and work a corporate job and when I was a kid I played like office with my Barbies. So having that kind of corporate experience was definitely satisfying for me. I worked half of my 15 years on the sales side of things. I managed a group of tellers, but I just got to the point I didn't care about checking accounts, loans. That was not important to me. And so I had the opportunity to go over to human resources, training and development, and I got one cute little bullet point about diversity, equity, inclusion in my job description. And I really loved supporting people in striving for the job they wanted. I was primarily responsible for teaching people the baseline entry level job, but then there was also that organizational development and saying, let's help you build a career. And I really loved doing that. But the diversity, equity, inclusion, that was the pitter patters of my heart. I absolutely loved doing it, but it was at a time where there was executive leadership by all middle-aged white men who did not get it. And so I tried pushing boundaries and thinking outside of the confines of their expectations, but there came a time where that task was actually going to be taken away from me
Mm.
because of restructuring. And that was the exact same time that I was thinking about leaving the credit union after my Master Chef experience. Because once you're in the Master Chef kitchen and you're cutting a bell pepper at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're realizing this is the dream of my life, it's hard to go back. It's hard to go back to work. So I love the credit union and pursued entrepreneurship, and I still have no idea what I'm doing every day, but I love it.
Oh, I love that story. Well, okay, I'm going to continue tracing the history a little bit here because then in 2016, you were
Mhm.
on the MasterChef show for
Mhm.
season 7, and you walked away as the fourth best home
Yeah.
cook and a master of shrimp and grits. I saw that in
Yes.
the eyes of
Yes.
Gordon Ramsay, which is a pretty awesome compliment. So tell us more about that experience of being on the MasterChef show.
I walked into that opportunity with the mindset that I was going to win and change my life. And I'm glad that I had that mindset because it allowed me to stay focused. But at the same time, I don't know that people realize that when you're on shows like that, it is very lonely. You are competing. Yes, you're making friends or you're maybe trying to, but you are competing. And so I tell people all the time that the only friend I had was God because it was every single day I would get done with, anywhere from a 10 to 16-hour day of filming. I would go back to my hotel room and I would do my devotion. I would do my journaling, kind of recap the day. And that was probably the thing that kept me focused and kept me in my right mind and kind of gave me stability and leverage to be able to compete. I didn't get to lean into my family or my church community often because we had maybe one 5-minute phone call a week to our families. And so it really was me by myself in that hotel room every night asking God, why did that happen? And also praying, Lord, please help me navigate some of these people that I don't know that I can handle. And you
Yeah.
know what? God does work in mysterious ways because in my journal, My husband says he's gonna sell them on eBay someday. In my journal, there are a couple of people that I was like, God, I can't with these people. And maybe 1 or 2 days later, they were eliminated after those journal entries. I'm like, okay, Lord, I see you. This is good.
I love it. Oh my
So,
goodness. Well, that resonates with some of the other guests that I've had on my show. I've had a couple different chefs who've been on some of the shows, and they did just share how hard it is behind the scenes
yeah.
and how lonely. And so I appreciate you just, giving us a little glimpse behind the curtain, so to speak, of that experience. But it sounds like there was some good in it too.
Yes, yes. I mean, it was absolutely validating for me that I am a great cook and that I deserve to be in this places and spaces where culinary professionals are. Hearing Gordon Ramsay and the culinary team, which some of those individuals studied under him, the producers who had been, filming these shows and have some culinary expertise that they've gleaned for years, hearing them talk about how good my food was and how well I was doing was definitely validating for me. And it was also great for me in a sense that I can be a very wound up, controlling, super anxious person. And during MasterChef, you have no control over anything.
Mm,
You really truly learned what surrender is all about because the only thing I knew every day was what to wear and what time to get up. And that's because someone told me.
wow. Yeah.
Everything else was a surprise, and there were plenty of times that I would say, "Okay, God, it's yours," because I had no other choice because I had no idea what was going on. So that experience and that kind of I say you have to have a Gumby-like mentality, so that kind of stretching
Yeah.
was really, really good for me just as a person and going into entrepreneurship.
Mm. Wow, some practical and it sounds like even spiritual lessons in that
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
place. Yeah, I can see that. Well, you mentioned before then that you got to write this cookbook and it was crossing
Mhm.
something off your bucket list, and I see that that confidence grew, partly out of that experience on the Master Chef show. So tell us about Staples Plus 5. Where did the idea come from for
Yes.
that cookbook and what was that process like?
Yeah, so Staples Plus 5, it's actually a combination of my childhood and how I grew up and my time on MasterChef. And I say that because I tell everyone I came from the Culinary Institute of my parents and grandparents. We were always the family that entertained, whether that meant we were going back to Tennessee to visit family for the holidays or over the summer, or we were the transplant family here in Indiana inviting other transplant families into our home. We were always entertaining. And I kind of realized, like, oh, this is how you make friends. Okay, you feed them.
Mhm.
But it was a matter of watching my mom make something out of nothing with very basic staple ingredients. I always say that my dad, after church on Sunday, we never quite knew who was going to end up at our dinner table because my dad would always just invite random people he met at church to come over for a meal. And my mom was the kind of person who would typically make Sunday dinner on Saturday or Sunday morning so that it was ready for us when we got home from church. And so she would have to go into the pantry and pull out random ingredients to make extra for the guests that were invited. And somehow she was able to create magic with a bag of flour, a bag of rice, and maybe some chicken that she pulled out to thaw for Monday dinner. She already had it thawing in the refrigerator. And so she could make magic with these basic ingredients because she cooked everything from scratch. And it turned out to be enough for the guest and enough for everyone to have leftovers. And I'm like, how did she do
Wow.
that?
Yeah.
And I truly, truly think that it was a matter of being able to build on basic cooking technique and mastering her basic pantry. My mom grew up the oldest of five with a single mother in a very low income environment. And her mom would always say, "Baby, as long as you have a bag of rice and a bag of flour and maybe some potatoes, you can make a meal." And while I am fortunate that I never had to experience needing those skills, I still have them.
Mm, that's awesome. I resonate with that so much. And I was thinking about my family, very similar. Grew up in this family that my mom actually is Italian, my dad's side is Filipino, Chinese, Polynesian, and
Mhm.
we were transplants from California to Chicago. So we didn't
Okay.
have family, and it was like my parents always invited all the people who
Yep.
also didn't have family, the transplants, like you're saying. And I love
Mhm.
it because those people became our family. And I believe it's
Yes.
because we gathered around the table because my mom made
Mhm.
great food, and everyone wanted to
Mhm.
be there. Even my friends from high school, went to a private school in Chicago, and it was just so funny because we definitely had like the smallest house, the smallest space, the least resources, and yet all of the people were at our house eating,
Yep.
they just
Mhm.
that was where we gathered. And so I can resonate with that even though we're in a different cultural context, that is just one of the ways that we cultivate community is by feeding
Yeah.
people. And I
Yeah.
love that skill that your mama passed on to you. That's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
staples, going into the pantry. I have to tell you, I used
Mhm.
to do this thing with some of my girlfriends at the end of the month. And this was probably when I was in my younger 20s when I had kids and we didn't have very much of a budget. We called it the pantry
Mhm.
challenge. And everybody
Okay.
would bring over like whatever they had in their pantry, if it was canned goods or it was like extra produce from their tree in the yard or whatever. And we would do kind of like that, like, okay, what can we make from these
Yes.
pantry ingredients? So when I saw your cookbook, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my pantry challenge. I love it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's a list of 35 ingredients like flour, rice, dried pasta, canned tomatoes, dried and canned beans, and you can have up to 5 additional ingredients. So think your proteins, your perishable items, but there's plenty of recipes in there that don't include 5 additional ingredients, or maybe there's only 1 or 2 additional ingredients. And how do you make a meal with those things? And there's even a story in the book where I had a friend who her husband was ill and she was momming 3 littles. And I said, I'm just going to bring you a meal. I'm going to bring you a meal. I'll come hang out. And she thought, wow, this meal is really good. Is this something I can make myself later when I'm able to,
Yeah.
start cooking for my family? And I said, yes, absolutely. You can make it yourself. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. It is fresh, it's using whole ingredients, and it is easily a recipe that would fit within that staples plus 5 rubric. And so I firmly believe that food is community. Food is a great connector. We all have one thing. I always say there's 2 things in common among no matter what the culture is, no matter what the socioeconomic status is, we all got to eat. And there's usually some kind of music when we are in crisis or we are in celebration. And so I don't have the music part down. I was in marching band. That's all I got for you. But the cooking part, the cooking part, I can help you there. And it is a matter of opening Staples Plus 5 and saying, I am going to make this family who just had a baby this chicken, mushroom, and rice skillet. Or I am going to open this book and I am going to make this taco chili for a family who just had a fire and they're staying in a hotel and maybe they just need a home cooked meal because they're sick of takeout. I
Mm,
want people to take the recipes from this book and use it to build community, use it to love on other people. But at the same time, I want a single mom who is raising her kids in the home and maybe also caring for an elderly parent in her home and has a myriad of different appetites to be able to take one meal and satisfy everyone. And
mm,
maybe that is the pantry spaghetti. Maybe that is the lemon spaghetti with roasted shrimp. Maybe that is a the chicken and biscuit pot pie in the recipe. But on the day that that single mom gets a moment to herself, if she can afford it and she can make pan-seared scallops with the brown butter sauce, I want her to do that too.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying not to drool on myself right now. All those ones that you mentioned. I'm going to show the cookbook to our YouTube watchers because we have some people who are getting to see it. So here's Staples Plus Five. Tenoria sent me a copy. It's so beautiful. And I'm like paging through, and you think pantry, you think staples, you think basic. But I mean, I'm looking at
Mhm.
recipes like candied bacon and
Mhm.
classic deviled
Mhm.
eggs and barbecue
Mhm.
pork belly tacos and cast iron
Yes.
seared steak with garlic
Yes.
herb compound butter. I mean, it's like, yes, my mouth is watering for reals. But also, it's this invitation into
Mhm.
food that's accessible.
Yes.
I love that. And I
Yes.
love that it's also like presented in such a beautiful way. So it's
Yeah.
not something that necessarily has to like break the bank.
Right, absolutely. It is important for me to be able to reach any socioeconomic status with Staples Plus 5. I live in the state of Indiana, Indianapolis specifically, and it is, most people don't realize, it is one of the largest food deserts in the nation.
Mm.
And so access to good quality fresh food across the main street that runs through the city of Indianapolis, it covers almost the whole county from east to west, and there's only 6 grocery stores on that whole coverage.
Oh, wow.
And that is one of the lowest income areas. One of the zip codes on the far east end of that is the lowest income area, and they have access to food through a convenience store or a liquor store. And so I want someone who doesn't have access to know that they, number one, deserve good quality food, that they can make good quality food. And then I hope that this book educates and empowers people to reduce that lack of access.
Mm. That's beautiful. I love that goal. And I think it really comes out through the photos, through the recipes, through the little stories that you share throughout. It's such an invitation for the cook and also for those who get to receive the food.
Mhm, mhm,
Beautiful.
yes. Yeah.
One of the things that I love to talk about on our podcast is just this idea of how do we experience God's glory. And as I'm
Mhm.
observing and getting to know you, I feel like one of the ways you experience God's glory is through food.
One of the ways that I know that God is ever present through food is the way that He has connected me to my ancestors, specifically my grandmother,
Mm.
through food, and knowing that while they are not here, they are still actually still here.
Yes.
There's a recipe in the book, the sweet potato pie bars. I feel like my grandmother was the quintessential old black church lady, and I loved her for it. Anytime there was a funeral, anytime someone was sick and shut in, there was an expectation that she would help with a meal. And so I feel like as a black woman, you like graduate to the traditional black church lady when you make a good sweet potato pie. And that sweet potato pie bar recipe is definitely a dedication to my grandmother. And I know she is present with me every time I make it.
Mm.
It is God's way of saying you are not alone. It is God's way of saying that she is in was in your life for a reason, and that his purpose and plan for me is to carry on her legacy. And that is just, it is incredibly special, especially when I think about Thanksgiving. You know, one of the other recipes in the book, the Southern fried corn, that is a recipe that was handed down from her, my paternal grandmother, to my mom, her daughter-in-law, and then passed on to me. And it is a warm and fuzzy hug from her that I know only God can make happen.
Mm. That's so powerful. And I love how food can embody that for us, that it
Yeah.
can really connect us. I definitely feel that when I'm making some special recipes by my grandmas too. My
Mhm.
Filipino grandma, like I'm rolling lumpia, I am thinking
Oh,
about my grandma.
can I
And when
come
I'm
over
making
for lumpia,
I know,
please?
can we trade like can you bring the sweet potato bars and I'll
Yes,
I'll make you some lumpia.
absolutely, absolutely.
My Italian grandma used to always make eggplant parmesan, and so that's a little bit more of a unique dish. It's not like your basic pasta you're going to get in an Italian restaurant, but whenever I
Mhm.
make that, like just the process of it, and it takes a while. The process of it, I do feel that what you're talking about, just that connection to her
Yeah.
and, thinking about memories from the past when I was a little girl and, just even the influence that she had on my faith as I was growing up
Mhm.
as well. So I
Mhm.
can really resonate with what you're sharing. So, do you have a favorite Bible verse or a passage that has inspired you in your faith since we're talking about faith here?
Yeah, I'm terrible at paraphrasing the Bible. So I have one, actually, I have two Bible verses. They're both on my wrist. One is Psalms 107:9, and that is, He satisfies the thirsty and fills the hungry with good things. And I just feel like that's my mission in life. It is kind of it feeds into my mission statement for my business. It feeds into my core values as a human. And then this one, don't be afraid to show hospitality to strangers. You may be entertaining angels. And I've kind of been coined the hospitality person, the strategy around entertaining someone, hosting someone. While it does not have to be bells and whistles, you do not have to roll out the red carpet, you do not have to break the bank. There are still little nuances you can do that makes someone feel welcome. When you're inviting someone into your home or into a space where you're going to commune with them and fellowship with them, there's so little things you can do to make them feel seen, valued, known, heard, loved. And I feel like God has given me the gift of that.
Mm.
Absolutely, He's given me the gift of that. So those two verses are really really special. And then just the Bible verse that's kind of like over my whole life is Habakkuk 1:5, which I'm terrible at paraphrasing, but basically, I'm gonna come and do things for you that you're not even gonna be able to believe, or
Mhm.
that so amazing that you can't even see it. And I'm like, yep, that's my life. That is absolutely my life. I say all the time, like, this is my life. Just thinking about where I was before I auditioned for MasterChef. I was in an abusive relationship. I was in survival mode. And then I got out of that relationship. And a year later, I started chasing dreams. I started listening to the plans that God had for my life. And now I'm saying, I just created this series of goals and I met all of them. And I've made, like, when people tell me that I inspire them and impact them, I'm like, ew, really? How? That's weird, but it's great. So those three verses, I really feel like are just my true essence. And anytime I feel down, feel unaccomplished, feel disconnected, I can tune into those verses. And I can also look back at my journals, look back at the times where I'm just spending time with God in gratitude. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I did do all of these amazing things. He used me in this way. Okay. I might not feel great today, but man, look at what I've been able to do.
That is inspiring. I love that you
Thank
shared that.
you.
Thank you. And specifically those verses, which are not like, the ones that people are quoting all the time. I love that
Yep.
it's this marriage between cooking and
Hmm.
hospitality. And that is so
Hmm.
much your heartbeat. And that you
Yeah.
keep that as kind of your plumb line as you
Yeah.
are, a businesswoman, you are seeing it as ministry, you are feeding
Mhm.
people in just the real and practical ways. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
Thank
one of the things
you.
that you mentioned earlier was that you were doing these cooking demos. And I know that
Hmm.
that's something you said kind of grew out of the situation in the pandemic. Tell us about the cooking demos and how those work.
Yeah. So, of course, we all had to shift with the pandemic. And I come from a background, my last half of my time at the credit union was to facilitate training. And we had to facilitate a lot of training through virtual conference based training. And so I kind of had that skill set in my back pocket. And one of the things that I will tell you I love the most is to educate and empower people about food. I don't necessarily want to cook for everyone all the time. I want people to feel like, yes, I can do this too. I can go and pay it forward with this knowledge that I've learned. And so I was online doing everything virtually because of the pandemic, and it became a great opportunity for me to help organizations stay connected with each other because they were virtual and do some team building. So I have had the pleasure of doing virtual cooking demonstrations for Salesforce, for Walgreens, for people who work for Google and Disney, for One America. And it is so refreshing to see because these participants, while it's a corporate setting, they're in their homes. So their guards are down a little bit more. Their kids or their family might pop up on the screen. And it's just really cool to be a part of that. And so, yeah, I still do them because the world is still virtual. And it has just been such a joy to be able to bring that as an option for people and even families who had to be separated virtually,
Mm.
giving them an opportunity to connect and make a recipe together. And, they laugh and they giggle and they say inside jokes. And the next thing you know, I'm a part of the family all over the computer. And it's wonderful.
That's so fun. I love that idea. And I love that it came out of kind of this pain point where people could not be
Yes.
physically together,
Yes.
but you are still building community through food. And
Mhm.
it sounds like it's even extending as an opportunity that you're having today as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Even with the holidays now, I know people will start calling to do them as, kind of the end of the year celebration. And it's so fun to do and get creative thinking about what recipes are we going to focus on because it's a holiday theme and different things like that. So I'm grateful. I'm so grateful.
That's so fun. Well, I hope that our listeners will check out the show notes. We're going to put Tanoria's website in there. And if that's something maybe you're interested in for your company or for your family, that you can check out her virtual cooking demos. You can even learn from
Mhm.
her. Before we go, I know we have to kind of wrap up this conversation, but because it's
Yeah.
Thanksgiving week, we have got to talk about Thanksgiving. And we alluded to it a bit
Yes.
before, but I'm wondering what are some of those signature dishes, those Bowl kind of dishes that you have on your
Mhm.
table for Thanksgiving?
Always the southern fried corn that's in Staples Plus 5. We always have slow cooked collard greens, and now there's a great debate between who makes them, me or my mom. My mom's mac and cheese recipe is in the book, and it is requested no matter who is invited to our table. They want to know that my mom is making mac and cheese. She gets literal standing ovations for it. So, her mac and cheese, and we usually will do a turkey. There's always a debate between my brother and my husband wanting to fry a turkey. And I'm like, please don't do that to my turkey. Let me love it with butter. And so we end up with two
Everything's
turkeys
better
because,
with butter.
yes, yes, we end up with two turkeys because there's always a great debate. So those are the heavy hitters at our table.
What about the
Yeah,
dessert
and then
course?
desserts. Oh, yeah, I'm usually responsible for all of the desserts. There's always a sweet potato pie. There's always a bourbon pecan pie, which is a recipe in the book. There's always that, and then my mom always wants like a classic sour cream pound cake because she says it reminds her of her grandmother. And so that's kind of special. I'm like, well, of course you said that. I'm gonna make it. And so yeah, that's really special. And then my favorite thing to make is cheesecake. It is a process, but it is so rewarding at the end. And so I actually have a new cheesecake recipe on my website. It's a sweet potato cheesecake.
Ooh.
So I'm very excited to expose that to my family for Thanksgiving.
Ooh, I might have to check that out. I am a cheesecake
Yes.
lover. I love eating and making cheesecake, and I don't think I've
Hmm.
ever heard of a sweet potato cheesecake.
Yeah.
That's a fun
Yeah.
twist.
I am team sweet potato, not team pumpkin.
Okay.
So I just reinvent all of the pumpkin spice things. If you want them sweet potato, you call me. So
Okay, I got you. So I have to tell you my favorite Thanksgiving dessert to make because this one has a twist. And I am team pumpkin. We make pumpkin tiramisu.
ooh, okay.
Yeah, it's really
I
fun,
would
but
be
I bet
down
I
to
could
try
make it
that.
with sweet potato. I might have to try
You
that.
totally can. I like that special take on tiramisu. That sounds fantastic. Would your Italian grandmother approve?
Well, that's not something that she ever made. It's not like a
Right.
classic, right? But
Yep.
tiramisu is, and so I feel
Yes.
like she would empower me to be creative.
Okay. I like that. I
And you
like
know what?
that.
Sometimes you just have to make the dessert that you love, that you're gonna
Mhm.
savor. So
Yes.
you're carrying on the
Mhm.
legacy with the sour, was it sour cream pound cake?
Yes. Mhm.
But then you're
Mhm.
also making your cheesecake because
Putting your own spin. Mhm. Yes. I have one more thing about Thanksgiving.
Sure.
I tell everyone this every single year. If you are not the cook for Thanksgiving, or if the kitchen intimidates you, just go get a stool or a chair and sit in the kitchen and glean from the people in the kitchen at Thanksgiving. Stay out of their way. Only help them if they ask, or if they offer help, or if you offer help and they say no, don't be offended, but go and glean. Get a notebook and write things down, because there's going to be a Thanksgiving where they are not there to make all of those traditions. So just sit at their feet and glean this holiday.
Beautiful
You can
advice.
find Thank you. I think about it every year.
I would love to know, how can our listeners connect with you and how can we support you?
You will find me on all of the social medias at Tanorria's Table: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm trying to figure out TikTok, but I think it's past my age line. My website's Tanorria's Table, and I have a podcast with my good friend Candace. It is called Black Girls Eating. It's a conversation about sisterhood, justice, and well seasoned food. So those are the places you can find me.
Ooh, well, we'll definitely put those in the show notes. I would love it. Listeners and viewers over on YouTube, if you would check out Tenoria's Table in all the places, and her cookbook, Staples Plus Five. She kind of whet our appetites by mentioning
Yay!
several of those yummy recipes that are in there. If you're looking for something fun to add to your Thanksgiving feast, there's a bunch
Mhm,
of great
mhm.
appetizers, desserts, all kinds of side dishes that are right there in her cookbook as well. Thank you so much for being on Eat,
Thank
Pray, Run.
you. Thank you for having me. This was delightful.
Well, at some point in the future, we're going to need to actually sit at the same table and swap some
Yes.
recipes.
But I will come to you, because the West Coast fresh food is better than the Midwest. I'm sorry, Midwest.
Oh, yeah. Girl, I live in Central California, so we
Uh-huh.
are all the farms, all the ranches
Uh-huh.
right here.
Mhm.
I've learned so much about food actually since I moved
Yes.
from the Midwest. It's pretty
Yes.
extraordinary to see where the food starts.
So yeah, I'll come to you and we'll just hang out and eat the whole trip.
Okay, anytime. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving to your family.
You too.
Friend, thank you for joining us for season 4, episode 11 of the Eat, Pray, Run podcast. We are so grateful that you were here at the table with us, leaning in, telling stories, remembering food that brings joy to our hearts. Happy Thanksgiving. If you're listening to this in November of 2022, when it is released, we would love to stay in touch with you more personally during this season. So just hop over to DorinaGilmore.com and sign up for my weekly Glorygram. It's a personal letter that includes a devotional and a list of resources to encourage you on your journey. And I'm also offering my subscribers some bonus content and episodes of the podcast during Advent. So this year's theme for Advent is rejoice. Let's rejoice and chase his glory together.